Hello, my name is Taylor Ross. I'm the owner of Frustum Virtual in Los Angeles, California. In this tutorial, I'll be going over the Anti-Latency Service. Anti-Latency Service is an application that allows you to configure the tracking area, tracker placement, and anti-latency device properties. You will also be able to update your device's firmware from the Anti-Latency Service software. In order to download this software, you need to go to antilatency.com. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll find the Developers tab. Now in the upper left-hand corner, you'll find this green circle. Go ahead and select it, and then find the Software tab. Now find Anti-Latency Service and select it. Once you find Anti-Latency Service, this is where you'll be able to download it. So the Anti-Latency Service that I've chosen, the version is 4.2.0. And then for the platform, I'm going to select Windows Desktop because I'm running it on a Windows computer. Then I'm just going to select Download. Once the Anti-Latency Service is downloaded, you'll find it in the Downloads folder. Because this is a zip file, you'll need to extract it before you can use it. Right-click on the zip file and then select Extract All. Once you've extracted this folder, I suggest placing it on your desktop so that you don't lose it. So I've moved this extracted folder from the downloads to my desktop. Now I'll double-click on this folder to open it. Next, I will open the x64 folder, and then we're going to find the Anti-Latency Service with the type Application. Double-click on the Anti-Latency Service to open it. I've pinned this application to my taskbar for easier access. Once Anti-Latency Service opens, you'll see different tabs at the top: Environments, Placement, and Device Network. The Environments tab is where you'll customize or set up your IR markers. So if you have a floor tracking volume, a ceiling, a truss, or pillar setup, this is where you'll create those custom environments. I have the custom floor tracking volume set to my default environment right now, represented by this blue check mark in the upper right-hand corner. In the lower right-hand corner, you'll see a plus button that will allow you to create new environments. You can load and edit the tracking area or create a new one, then share it by a link. So if you've created a custom environment on a different computer, the From Link option allows you to share any custom environment you've created with any computer that might be running the Anti-Latency Service. You can create a custom environment from scratch by selecting New Environment. In the Add New Environment tab, you'll be able to rename the environment as well as select what type of environment you have: horizontal grid, arbitrary 2D, or pillars. Horizontal grid environment provides several options for IR marker placement: floor, ceiling, or truss. In an arbitrary 2D environment, markers are also located in the same horizontal plane, but unlike a horizontal grid environment, they are located in a coordinate grid, arbitrary and independently of each other. The pillar environment is designed to be used for the pillar tracking area. These special devices are designed by Anti-Latency, and they're called pillars. I will be going over these different environment setups in other tutorials. In this tutorial, I will just be covering the basics of the Anti-Latency Service. The last thing I'll cover here is how to set a default environment. Select the three dots on the environment, and then select Set as Default. This will put a blue check mark in the upper right-hand corner of the environment that will be the default environment that Anti-Latency will reference. Now that we've briefly discussed the Environments tab, we'll navigate to the Placements tab at the top. This is where you'll specify the placement of your physical hardware on your camera or VR headset. So I have Identity. Identity down is the one that I use for my floor tracking volume. Identity forward inverted is the same as Identity, except the tracker is upside down. For the pillar environment, I'm using Identity or Identity forward inverted. This is because the Anti-Latency alt needs to be able to see as many of our IR markers as possible. I use the custom placement Identity down for the floor tracking volume. So when I have my floor tracking volume set to my default, I use Identity down. When you're setting up the placement of your alt tracker on your camera or VR headset, you just want to make sure that it can see as many of your IR markers as possible. To create a new placement, you can select the plus button in the bottom right-hand corner. Just like in the Environments tab, you have the options to choose From Link or Custom. Use the From Link option to import custom placements from other systems. To create a new custom placement, select Custom. We'll give this a name, and then select Next. This will open the placement editor. Use your right-click mouse button to orbit around the position of the alt. Click and hold the middle mouse button to move up and down or left and right. In a separate tutorial, I will discuss placement in detail. In that tutorial, I will be showing you the process of setting up the offset between your camera's nodal point and the placement of your anti-latency device. Be sure to watch that tutorial for more information on device placement. Since this is a brief overview, I will only show you a few of the options you have in moving your anti-latency device in this Placements tab. You can place your alt tracker using the arrows by clicking and dragging, or you can input specific measurements using the position and rotation values on the right. I'll zero this back out. In this view, you can see that the alt is represented by this green outline. You'll need to make sure that the position and rotation of your alt match the position and rotation of how you will physically mount the alt to your camera or VR headset. Once we're happy with the placement, we can select this back arrow and then select Apply. Now down here at the bottom, you'll see this identity tutorial. To set this as the default, you'll select these three dots and then select Set as Default. You can also edit, delete, copy link, and look at the description. If I wanted to set this as my default, I would select Set as Default, and then this would be reflected by the blue check mark in the upper right-hand corner. Now that I've briefly covered how the Placements tab works in the Anti-Latency Service, I will navigate back to the top and show you some of my custom placements. So I have Identity, Identity Down, and Identity Forward. If I select Identity Down and set as default, now Identity Down will be set as my default, reflected by this blue check mark in the upper right-hand corner. I can also come in here and select Edit to show you how this is placed. So for the floor tracking volume, the alt is looking directly down, and I have my rotation set to 90 on the X and 180 on the Z. This is just because the physical placement of my alt on my camera will mirror what I see here in the Anti-Latency Service. You want to make sure that you can see as many of your IR markers as possible. So for the floor tracking volume, you want to be looking directly down. When you're using the pillars, you want to be looking directly forward. And then when using the ceiling or truss, you want to be looking directly up. Again, this is just to make sure that your alt can see as many of your IR markers as possible. Next, we'll navigate to the Device Network tab. This is where you'll be able to see all of the devices that are connected to your system. There are several different ways to connect your alt directly to your system. Right now I have the Anti-Latency VP socket connected with a long USB cable. There's also a wireless setup that I'll go over in another tutorial. But for this tutorial, I just want to show you briefly what it looks like. So there's root, Anti-Latency VP socket. This is the socket that's connected directly to my computer. And then below that, I have alt, which is the alt that's connected directly to that socket. So if I select the Anti-Latency Virtual Production socket, you'll see all of the socket settings here. The main thing I want to cover in this tutorial is the tag properties. So if I have my tag with the device 0 label, this will be what populates in other programs like Unreal Engine or Ximitree. By default, this would be blank. Once you make changes to any of these device settings, they will be represented by this little pin. It will say new value is scheduled for applying, which basically means that this setting is not updated to the device. In order to apply these changes, I'll navigate to the pin in the lower right-hand corner, and then I'll select Send Settings to Device. Once these new settings have been sent to the device, there will be no pin on the left-hand side. The tag property is the name of the device in other programs. So I want to change this back to device 0. With the tag setting updated to device 0, I can navigate back to the pin and select Send to Device. I can also select Reload Settings from Device to revert back to what the device is currently set to. So let's say I change some device settings that I didn't want to change. I can reload settings from device, and it will revert back to the device settings that are currently set to the device. So now you can see that my tag property has been updated back to be blank. This is because the last device settings that we sent didn't have a label in the tag. I recommend using these tag settings to label all of the different devices on all of the different cameras that you'll be using. This will just make it a lot easier when you're using it in Ximitree or Unreal Engine. You'll be able to differentiate which device goes to which camera. When you're using anti-latency for camera tracking in Unreal Engine, you'll need to make sure that you set this tag because you'll be using a FreeD server, and the FreeD server will be referencing this tag property. I will be covering all of that information in another tutorial. For this tutorial, I just wanted to go over quickly what this tag property does and how you can send settings to your device. Now that I've updated this tag to device 0, I'll go ahead and select my pin and send settings to device. The last setting I want to cover in the device network tab is how to flash your firmware or update your firmware. You'll select the device on the left-hand side and then select the pin and select reflash firmware. This is where you can update the firmware of your devices. So you can select the most recent and then select flash, and this will push the firmware to the device. I'm already on the most current firmware, so I won't do anything here. But after you select flash, normally it takes a few minutes and it will update the firmware of your device. You can also update the firmware of the alt itself by doing the same thing. Select the pin and then select reflash firmware, and then you'll see all the different firmwares that are available for the alt. Again, all of my devices are already updated to the most recent firmware, so I won't flash anything here. But if you need to update or downgrade the firmware that's running on your device, that's how you would do it. In future tutorials, I will be going more in depth in the anti-latency service, setting up custom environments. I will also be covering the setup of a FreeD server to run in Unreal Engine. For this tutorial, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of the anti-latency service. Hopefully this video was helpful in getting you started with anti-latency service. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos, and thanks for watching.